The paradox of virtue, when being good becomes your greatest liability. The question nobody asks. Here's something that will fundamentally shift how you understand human nature. What if the very qualities you've been taught to cultivate, compassion, selflessness, unconditional kindness, are the same forces quietly dismantling your life? This isn't a call to abandon your moral compass. This is an invitation to examine something far more sophisticated: the difference between virtue as blind habit and virtue as conscious strategy, between goodness that empowers and goodness that imprisons. The ancient strategists understood what modern society has forgotten. Morality without discernment isn't virtue. It's vulnerability dressed in noble clothing. The 7 hidden costs of unexamined goodness. Cost 1. The erosion of reciprocity. The invisible transaction. Every human interaction operates on an unspoken economy of exchange. Not the crude transactional thinking of, "I'll do this if you do that," but something more subtle, the psychological contract of mutual investment. When you consistently give without calibrating your investment to the relationship's value, you create a dangerous imbalance. You're not building goodwill. You're training people to view your contributions as their entitlement. The psychology of devaluation. There's a principle in behavioral economics called the endowment effect. People value things more highly when they've invested in acquiring them. The inverse is equally true. Things that come too easily are valued less. When you make yourself perpetually available, always the one who volunteers, always the one who accommodates, always the one who sacrifices, you trigger a perverse psychological mechanism. Your availability becomes your devaluation. Consider this: a therapist charges for their time because they understand that when people pay, they value the session more. They show up, they engage, they apply the insights. Free therapy, paradoxically, often produces less transformation because the recipient hasn't invested anything. Your indiscriminate generosity works the same way. The friend who knows you'll always drop everything loses respect for your time. The colleague who knows you'll always cover their work stops improving. The family member who knows you'll always provide stops developing self-reliance. Think about the most consistently kind person in your life. Now ask yourself honestly, do people treat their time with reverence? Or do they casually reschedule, show up late, and make last-minute requests assuming compliance? This isn't because humans are inherently selfish. It's because humans are inherently adaptive. We calibrate our behavior to what the environment rewards. When your environment rewards presumption and taking advantage, that's what you'll receive. Strategic virtue operates differently. It creates scarcity of access while abundance of impact. Instead of being available to everyone marginally, you become unavailable to most, but transformational to a select few. Your help becomes an event, not a given. Your yes carries weight because it's rare. Your investment creates lasting change because it's concentrated. This doesn't make you less good. It makes you more effective at creating positive outcomes, which is what true goodness actually means. Cost 2. The corruption of your own boundaries. The slow dissolution. Here's what happens when you practice undiscriminating kindness. You begin to lose the ability to recognize where you end and others begin. At first, it feels noble. You're being selfless, putting others first, practicing the virtues you've been taught. But something insidious starts happening beneath your conscious awareness. Every time you say yes when you mean no, you teach your nervous system to override your authentic responses. Every time you suppress your needs to accommodate someone else's wants, you train yourself to distrust your own judgment. Every time you ignore your exhaustion to remain available, you sever the connection to your internal compass. Over months and years, this creates a fundamental identity crisis. You no longer know what you actually want, need, or value, because you've spent so long ignoring those signals that they've become background noise. The resentment spiral. This is where the real psychological damage occurs. Because humans aren't built for sustained self-negation. Your authentic needs don't disappear just because you ignore them. They go underground. And underground needs become resentment. You start feeling angry at the very people you're helping. You feel bitter about the sacrifices you're making. You feel exploited, even though you're the one who created the dynamic. Then you feel guilty for feeling resentful, because good people don't feel this way. This guilt creates a vicious cycle. You try to compensate for your resentment by giving even more, which creates more resentment. which creates more guilt, which drives more giving. You've become trapped in a psychological prison of your own construction, and the bars are made of obligations you never explicitly agreed to but somehow can't escape. The neurological dimension. Neuroscience reveals something fascinating about boundary violations. When you consistently override your authentic responses, you literally rewire your brain's threat detection system. Your amygdala, the part of your brain that signals "this doesn't feel right," starts getting suppressed by your prefrontal cortex, which is executing your conscious decision to be accommodating. Over time, your brain learns to not send those warning signals at all. This is why people who've been excessively accommodating for years often can't even recognize when they're being taken advantage of. Their internal alarm system has been systematically disabled. The recovery path. Rebuilding healthy boundaries after years of erosion is like physical rehabilitation after an injury. It requires recalibration of signals, learning to recognize again what your authentic yes and no feel like in your body. Not what you think you should feel, but what you actually feel. Tolerance for discomfort. Saying no will feel wrong at first. Not because it is wrong, but because you've trained yourself to associate it with being a bad person. Acceptance of conflict. People who've benefited from your boundarylessness will resist your transformation. This is normal. Their discomfort is not your responsibility. Rediscovery of self. You'll need to reconnect with who you are beneath all the accommodation. Your actual preferences, desires, and non-negotiables. This isn't selfishness. This is survival. You cannot give from an empty well, and you cannot fill your well if you never stop drawing from it. Cost 3. The attraction of predators. The beacon effect. Here's an uncomfortable truth that most discussions of kindness avoid. Certain personality types are specifically attracted to indiscriminately kind people, not because they appreciate your virtue, but because they recognize opportunity. Narcissists, manipulators, energy vampires, and emotional parasites have a radar for people with weak boundaries. They can sense accommodation the way sharks sense blood in water. This isn't mystical, it's behavioral pattern recognition. They've learned through experience that certain signals indicate an exploitable person. Reluctance to say no, excessive apologizing, over-explaining decisions, seeking approval before acting, prioritizing harmony over honesty, accepting blame to end conflict. When you exhibit these patterns consistently, you're not just being kind. You're broadcasting, "I'm safe to exploit," to exactly the wrong people. The selection bias. Over time, your social circle undergoes a form of natural selection. People who respect boundaries quietly drift away, not because they don't like you, but because there's no space for reciprocal relationship. They need equals, not endless givers. Meanwhile, people who exploit boundaries become increasingly prominent in your life. They stick around precisely because you provide something they can't get from healthier people: unconditional supply. This creates a devastating feedback loop. The good people leave because the dynamic is unbalanced. The takers stay because the dynamic is perfect for them. Then you look around and think, "See? People are just selfish. I'm the only one who gives." But this conclusion is wrong. You've inadvertently selected for selfishness by making selflessness your only mode. The camouflage problem. Here's what makes this particularly insidious. Exploitative people often appear very appreciative initially. They'll praise your kindness effusively. They'll tell you how special you are, how rare your generosity is, how everyone else is selfish but you truly care. This feels validating. It confirms your identity as a good person. But watch what happens over time. The appreciation shifts to expectation. The gratitude becomes entitlement. The praise transforms into manipulation. "You're such a caring person. I knew you'd help me with this." You've been positioned in a role that makes refusal feel like betrayal of your own identity. They're not explicitly threatening you. They're using your own self-concept as the cage. The boundary test. Want to know if someone is genuinely appreciative or subtly exploitative? Set a boundary and observe their response. Healthy people accept boundaries with grace. They might be disappointed, but they respect your right to have limits. They adjust their expectations, and the relationship continues, often growing stronger because there's now honesty. Exploitative people respond to boundaries with guilt tripping, "After everything I've done for you." Gaslighting, "You're being sensitive/selfish/unreasonable." Manipulation, "I thought you were different." Withdrawal, "Fine, I guess I know where I stand." Escalation, increasing demands to test if the boundary holds. Your boundaries aren't the problem in these relationships. Your boundaries are the diagnostic tool that reveals what the relationship actually was. The protection protocol. To stop attracting predators, you must stop signaling availability for exploitation. Delay your yes. Never immediately agree to requests. Let me think about it. Create space for evaluation. Ask reciprocity questions. What would you do for me in return? Healthy people don't mind this. Exploiters reveal themselves through indignation. Notice the pattern. Does this person only reach out when they need something? That tells you everything. Observe their reaction to no. Their response to your first boundary reveals their intentions. Value yourself audibly. People who constantly self-deprecate signal that they can be devalued. Speak of your time and energy as valuable. Cost 4. The illusion of moral superiority. The hidden pride. There's a deeply uncomfortable question that indiscriminate kindness usually avoids. Why are you actually being so generous? The easy answer is because it's the right thing to do, or because I care about people. These might be true, but often there's something else operating beneath the surface. For many people, excessive generosity is a form of identity protection. It's how they maintain the belief that they're good, moral, superior to others who are selfish. This creates a subtle but toxic dynamic. You need people to need you. You need to be the helper, the giver, the one who sacrifices. Because without that role, who are you? What makes you valuable? This isn't genuine compassion. It's ego dressed in altruistic clothing. The validation addiction. When your sense of self-worth depends on being needed, you unconsciously seek out situations where people need you. You might even, without realizing it, enable dependency because it validates your identity. The friend who never solves their own problems becomes emotionally dependent on your advice, and you feel important. The colleague who never learns the system keeps coming to you, and you feel indispensable. The family member who never develops skills keeps needing your help, and you feel valuable. But here's the devastating truth. If your goodness requires others to remain weak, it's not actually goodness. It's a parasitic relationship where you feed on their need to feel good about yourself. The comparison trap. Excessive givers often have a subtle contempt for those who maintain boundaries. They think, I would never be that selfish, or at least I'm not like them, only thinking of themselves. This comparison is how the ego maintains the identity of moral superiority, but it reveals the dynamic's true nature. You're not giving because it's good, you're giving to feel better than others. Real compassion doesn't require witnesses or comparison. It doesn't need to be recognized or validated. It doesn't require anyone else to be selfish for it to feel meaningful. If your generosity can only exist in contrast to others' selfishness, you're not practicing virtue, you're performing it. The martyrdom complex. This often culminates in what psychologists call the martyr complex, identifying with suffering and sacrifice as proof of goodness. Martyrs unconsciously seek situations where they can suffer for others. They frame their exhaustion as evidence of their virtue. They wear their resentment like a badge of honor, proof that they care more than anyone else. But martyrdom isn't the highest form of goodness. It's the ego's most sophisticated disguise. Jesus didn't stay on the cross. Buddha didn't remain under the tree. Muhammad didn't stay in the cave. The truly transformational figures in history understood that sustainable impact requires sustainability of self. Burning yourself out doesn't make you noble. It makes you a cautionary tale. The authentic alternative. Real virtue is quiet. It doesn't need to announce itself or compare itself to others. It doesn't require suffering to prove its authenticity. Real compassion wants others to become capable, not remain dependent. It seeks to empower, not to enable. It creates independence, not addiction. When you give from genuine abundance rather than ego need, you feel energized rather than depleted. You feel at peace rather than resentful. You want others to succeed on their own rather than continually need you. The question to ask yourself, would I still do this if nobody knew about it, nobody praised me for it, and the person I'm helping became completely self-sufficient as a result? If the answer is no, you're serving your ego, not the other person. Cost 5. The weakness of predictability. The tactical disadvantage. In any domain where outcomes matter, business, negotiations, relationships, career advancement, predictability is a liability. When people know exactly how you'll respond, they can manipulate that response. When you're reliably accommodating, you lose negotiating power. When you're consistently available, your time becomes worthless. When you're always understanding, people stop trying to understand you. This isn't about becoming erratic or unreliable in a chaotic sense. It's about maintaining strategic flexibility, the ability to respond differently depending on the situation and the person. The game theory principle. Game theory teaches us something crucial about repeated interactions. The optimal strategy in most scenarios is tit for tat with forgiveness. You start cooperative. You respond to cooperation with cooperation. But you respond to defection with defection. Then you forgive and return to cooperation. This strategy outperforms both pure altruism, always cooperate, and pure selfishness, always defect, because it's adaptive. It rewards good behavior and punishes bad behavior, creating incentive structures that promote cooperation. Indiscriminate kindness breaks this principle. You cooperate regardless of how others treat you. This removes all incentive for them to reciprocate. In fact, it creates incentive to exploit because there are no consequences. You've essentially told the world, I will always cooperate, even when you defect. This is the weakest possible position in any strategic interaction. The respect equation. Here's a formula most people don't want to accept. Respect equals value times scarcity times unpredictability. You can be highly valuable, but if you're completely predictable and infinitely available, your respect coefficient plummets to near zero. This is why the perpetually nice person at work doesn't get promoted. It's not that their work isn't good, it's that their compliance is guaranteed. There's no risk of losing them, no fear of upsetting them, no calculation required in how to manage them. Meanwhile, the person who strategically pushes back, who selectively helps, who maintains some mystery about their availability, they command respect. Not because they're better people, but because they're unpredictable. Unpredictability creates a calculation cost. People have to think before asking you for something. They have to consider whether you'll say yes. They have to value your time because they can't assume it's available. This calculation cost translates directly into respect. The calibration practice. Becoming strategically unpredictable doesn't mean being randomly difficult. It means calibrating your responses too. The relationships investment. People who've invested in you deserve different treatment than those who haven't. The request's nature. Emergency versus preference. Reasonable versus entitled. Your current capacity. Abundant energy versus depleted reserves. The pattern history. Is this the first request or the 15th? The reciprocity record. Do they give as well as take? When you factor in these variables, your responses become legitimately unpredictable because they're contextual. People can't game the system because the system is intelligent, not automatic. Cost 6. The postponement of authentic development. The avoidance mechanism. Here's a pattern that plays out with disturbing frequency. People who are excessively focused on others' needs are often avoiding their own development. Being perpetually helpful becomes a sophisticated procrastination mechanism. You're always so busy with others' problems that you never have to face your own challenges, pursue your own dreams, or confront your own inadequacies. This serves a psychological function. It lets you feel productive and virtuous while avoiding the harder work of personal growth. Helping your friend with their resume is easier than updating your own. Advising someone on their relationship is easier than fixing yours. Supporting someone else's dream is easier than pursuing your own. The perpetual helper is often the perpetual avoider, the competence gap. While you're busy solving everyone else's problems, you're not developing the capabilities you need for your own advancement. You're building expertise in other people's domains, not your own. You're learning about their challenges, not mastering yours. You're investing time in their growth while your own stagnates. 10 years pass. You look around and realize you've helped dozens of people achieve their goals, but you're no closer to achieving yours. You've made everyone else's life better, but your own life looks remarkably similar to how it did a decade ago. This is the postponement trap. You've traded your future for the satisfaction of being needed in the present. The delegation of dreams. There's a particularly insidious version of this where people live vicariously through others' achievements. You help your child pursue their passion because you never pursued yours. You mentor young professionals because you never took the risks you now advise them to take. You champion others' causes because you don't have the courage to champion your own. This feels noble, you're supporting others. But it's actually a form of psychological surrender. You've given up on your own potential and now experience achievement only through others. This isn't sustainable. Eventually, the resentment emerges. I gave up everything for you, and this is how you repay me? But the truth is, nobody asked you to give up everything. You chose that as a way to avoid the scarier work of developing yourself. The reclamation process. Breaking this pattern requires honest examination. What am I avoiding by staying busy with others? Usually there's a dream you're afraid to pursue, a change you're afraid to make, or a truth you're afraid to face. What would I do with my time if I weren't solving others' problems? The answer reveals what you've been postponing. Whose life am I actually building? If you've spent more time on others' goals than your own, you're the architect of their life, not yours. What skills have I neglected while developing theirs? The gap between where you are and where you could be. The path forward isn't to become selfish, it's to become balanced. Time for self-development isn't taken from others. It's invested in becoming someone who can contribute at a higher level later. The most impactful people in history weren't perpetual helpers. They were people who developed themselves to such a high level that their contributions became transformational. Cost 7. The destruction of authentic relationships. The impossibility of true connection. Here's perhaps the most tragic cost of indiscriminate kindness. It prevents genuine relationships from forming. Real connection requires mutual vulnerability, honest communication, and reciprocal investment. When you're always the giver, always the accommodator, always the one who adapts, you make authentic connection impossible. Why? Because the other person never has to struggle to understand you. They never have to adjust to your needs. They never have to consider your perspective. They never have to invest in the relationship because you're doing all the investing. What you end up with isn't a relationship. It's a service agreement where you're the provider and they're the consumer. The performance trap. When you're always on, always positive, always helpful, always available, you're performing a role, not being a person. Real people have bad days. They have needs. They have limits. They have moments of selfishness. They have boundaries. They have opinions that might create conflict. By never showing these dimensions, you've created a relationship with a character you're playing, not the actual person you are. This means nobody truly knows you. They know your pleasant exterior, your helpful persona, your accommodating nature. But they don't know your struggles, your needs, your authentic self. The loneliness paradox. This creates a profound loneliness. You're surrounded by people, you're constantly helping, you're always connected, and yet you feel completely alone. Because you are alone. You're alone with the real you, while everyone else only knows the version you perform for them. The perpetual helper is often the most isolated person in their social circle, despite being the most connected. They know everyone's problems, but share none of their own. They're present for everyone's struggles, but invisible in their own. The asymmetry problem. Healthy relationships require reciprocity, not transactional, I did this so you do that, but genuine mutual investment where both people give and receive, both people support and are supported, both people lead and follow at different times. Excessive kindness destroys this symmetry. You've positioned yourself as the perpetual giver, which positions the other person as the perpetual taker. Even if they'd like to reciprocate, you've made it structurally impossible. You don't ask for help. You don't share struggles. You don't create space for them to give to you. So the relationship becomes unidirectional, which isn't a relationship at all. It's a dependency structure. The authentic alternative. Real intimacy emerges from mutual vulnerability and reciprocal trust. This requires sharing your struggles. Let people see you're human. This creates permission for authentic connection. Asking for help. Giving others the opportunity to give to you builds the relationship in both directions. Having boundaries. When you have clear limits, people know where they stand and can relate to the real you rather than the endless capacity version. Creating conflict. Sometimes disagreement is necessary for genuine connection. If you never disagree, you're performing harmony, not experiencing it. Being imperfect, your mistakes and flaws make you relatable. Your constant perfection makes you alienating. The relationships worth having are the ones that survive your authenticity. The ones that only exist because of your constant accommodation aren't relationships, they're arrangements. The framework for strategic virtue. Now that we've examined the costs, let's explore the alternative. Virtue as conscious strategy rather than unconscious habit. Principle 1. Calibrated generosity. The scarcity model. Instead of being marginally helpful to everyone, become transformationally helpful to a select few. This doesn't mean being stingy with kindness. It means being strategic with investment. Your time, energy, and resources are finite. The question isn't whether to give them away, it's where to invest them for maximum positive impact. The selection criteria. Before committing to help someone, evaluate. Values alignment. Do they share your core principles? Helping someone build something you don't believe in is a misuse of your resources. Reciprocity history. Have they demonstrated willingness to invest in relationships, or do they only extract? Genuine need versus convenience. Are you solving a real problem or enabling avoidance? Your capacity. Can you help meaningfully without depleting yourself? Long-term impact. Will this help create lasting change or just temporary relief? When all these factors align, invest heavily. Give generously. Create real transformation. But when they don't align, decline with clarity and without guilt. The depth principle. Your impact is a function of depth times breadth. Helping 100 people superficially creates less total value than transforming 10 people's lives completely. Focus on depth. Become known for creating profound change in select contexts rather than marginal help in all contexts. Principle 2. Conditional availability. The boundary structure. Availability should have terms and conditions, just like any valuable resource. This doesn't mean being transactional. It means being intentional about access to your time, energy, and attention, the 3 tiers. Structure relationships in tiers based on mutual investment. Tier 1. Inner circle. People who have demonstrated reciprocity, shared values, and genuine relationship. These people get exceptional access to you. Tier 2. Active relationships. People you're building relationships with or who have situational connection. These people get conditional access based on specific needs and mutual benefit. Tier 3. Peripheral connections. People who haven't invested in relationship with you. These people get very limited access, primarily in contexts that serve mutual interests. This isn't hierarchy of worth, it's hierarchy of relationship depth. Everyone starts at Tier 3. They move to Tier 2 through genuine interaction. They reach Tier 1 through demonstrated reciprocity over time. The access protocol. Create clear protocols for how people access your help. Scheduled availability. Specific times you're available for requests, rather than 24/7 accessibility. Request filtering. Not all requests deserve the same priority. Create a mental or actual system for evaluating. Response timing. Not every message requires immediate response. Calibrate urgency to actual importance. Capacity limits. Explicit limits on how many commitments you'll take on simultaneously. These aren't barriers to keep people out. They're filters to ensure you can actually help those you commit to helping. Principle 3. Strategic disclosure. The information architecture. Just as you're selective with your time and energy, be selective with personal information. Not everyone needs to know your struggles, your plans, your vulnerabilities. This information should be shared strategically with people who've earned that level of trust. The disclosure levels. Public information, what anyone can know. General interests, professional background, public achievements. Relationship information, what people in active relationship know. Some personal history, general challenges, developing plans. Intimate information, what only inner circle knows. Deep vulnerabilities, detailed struggles, comprehensive plans. Most perpetual givers make the mistake of sharing intimate information publicly. They overshare their struggles as a form of connection seeking or to justify their boundaries. But this creates vulnerability without reciprocity. You've given people information they can use against you without receiving equivalent trust in return. The selective vulnerability. Vulnerability should be mutual and progressive. You share a small vulnerability. They reciprocate. You go deeper. They go deeper. This builds trust gradually through demonstrated safety. Immediate, deep vulnerability isn't intimacy. It's often a red flag indicating poor boundaries or manipulation. Principle 4. Outcome-based helping. The impact measurement. Shift from, am I being helpful, to am I creating positive change? These aren't the same question. You can be very helpful while creating no lasting improvement. In fact, perpetual helping often prevents growth by removing the pressure that motivates change. The empowerment test. Ask, is my help making this person more capable or more dependent? If your help is creating dependency, you're not actually helping, you're enabling. Real help builds capacity. It teaches skills. It creates independence. It eventually makes itself unnecessary. If someone is continually coming to you for the same type of help, you're not solving the problem, you're becoming part of it. The teach/do matrix. Before helping, ask, should I do this for them or teach them how to do it? Doing it is faster and easier in the short term. Teaching is harder and slower but creates lasting value. Strategic helpers bias heavily toward teaching. They're willing to invest more time upfront to create long-term independence. Principle 5. Reciprocity requirement. The mutual investment. Healthy relationships require reciprocity. This doesn't mean keeping score, but it does mean ensuring mutual contribution. If you're always giving and someone is always taking, that's not a relationship. It's exploitation, even if it's polite exploitation. The reciprocity indicators. Healthy reciprocity shows up as mutual initiation. Both people reach out. Both people invest in maintaining contact. Balanced support. Both people offer help. Both people receive help. Consideration. Both people consider the other's needs and adjust behavior accordingly. Appreciation. Both people express genuine gratitude for the other's contributions. When these indicators are absent or unidirectional, the relationship is structurally unsound. The rebalancing conversation. When relationships become unbalanced, direct conversation is required. I've noticed I'm usually the one initiating contact. I'd like us both to invest in staying connected. I'm happy to help, and I'd also appreciate support when I need it. I'm feeling like the relationship is one-sided. Can we talk about how to make it more mutual? These conversations are uncomfortable but necessary. The relationships that survive are the ones worth keeping. The ones that don't were exploitative arrangements pretending to be relationships. The integration, becoming strategically virtuous. The goal isn't to abandon goodness. It's to elevate it from unconscious habit to conscious strategy. Strategic virtue means helping powerfully rather than constantly. Concentrated impact versus diffused effort. Investing in people who invest back. Reciprocal relationships versus one-sided extraction. Creating capacity rather than dependency. Empowerment versus enabling. Maintaining boundaries that protect your ability to give. Sustainable generosity versus burnout. Measuring impact over activity. Results versus effort. Being selective to be effective. Quality versus quantity. This approach doesn't make you less good. It makes you more strategically effective at creating positive outcomes. The transformation. The shift from blind kindness to strategic virtue requires several psychological adjustments. From obligation to choice. You help because you choose to, not because you must. From guilt to clarity. Saying no becomes ethically neutral, not morally fraught. From performance to authenticity. You're being genuine rather than performing goodness. From depletion to energization. Giving from abundance rather than scarcity. From resentment to peace. Clear boundaries prevent the buildup of resentment. From dependency to empowerment. Your help creates capability rather than need. This transformation isn't comfortable. People who've benefited from your indiscriminate availability will resist. Your own identity as the nice one will feel threatened. Your ego's investment in being needed will protest. But on the other side of this discomfort lies something profound. The ability to be genuinely good rather than performatively nice. The capacity to create real impact rather than temporary relief. The freedom to build authentic relationships rather than transactional arrangements. The ultimate question. We've explored the hidden costs of unexamined goodness. We've examined how virtue without strategy often creates the opposite of its intended effects. Now you face a choice. Will you continue being good in ways that drain you, attract exploiters, prevent authentic connection, and create dependency? Or will you evolve into someone who practices goodness as conscious strategy, selective in investment, powerful in impact, sustainable in practice? The world doesn't need more people who are nice. It needs people who are strategically effective at creating positive change. Your goodness is a resource. The question is whether you'll spend it like someone who doesn't understand its value, or invest it like someone who knows exactly what it's worth. The answer you choose will determine not just your own well-being, but the actual positive impact you create in the world. Because here's the final paradox. The most good is created not by those who try to be good to everyone, but by those who are strategically excellent at being good to the right people, in the right ways, at the right times. That's not selfishness, that's wisdom. And wisdom, ultimately, is what allows goodness to actually work. Power begins with awareness. This is Door to the Mind. Subscribe.